Hi all, this is Tuesday, it's not Thursday. As I said last week, Ken and I are going on vacation starting tomorrow, so I just wanted to get this in. Next week I will not be recording, but the following week I will do Re'eh and Shoftim, a Parsha discussion that brings the two of them together. So just to be aware, this is for Parshat Ekev this coming Shabbat. Next Shabbat is Re'eh. I will do that on the back end along with Shoftim after Labor Day. Okay? All right. Parshat Ekev. I've called this What If? We're definitely living in complex and interesting times. There is uncertainty. There are too many challenges. And within it all, we keep putting one foot in front of the other, pick up our heel, and move on. Ekev, heel. Because of connection. That is what we are supposed to do. We live our lives, we hope for the best, and we do what we can to achieve that in our own parts of the world. This is the message of Parshat Ekev. Our future is not a given, and it will not come without challenges, without setbacks. And furthermore, it's conditional. And even if we do everything right, and do not achieve the hoped-for goal, we do not stop. We do not hold ourselves back and sit on our heels. Ekev. We begin our Parsha in chapter 7 of Devarim. V'hayu Ekev tishma'un et mishpatim ha'ele u'shmatem v'asitem otam u'shmar Hashem Elokecha l'cha et habrit et ha'chesed asher nishba l'vedecha. And again, as always, notice the interfacing of singular and plural. We are enjoined for all of this individually and then also as a collective. And it will be, if you will heed these ordinances and keep them and perform them, that God will keep for you the covenant and the kindness that God swore to your forefathers. God will love you, v'ahavcha, uve'racha, v'hirbecha, uve'rech pri bitnecha, will bless you, will multiply you, bless the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your soil, your grain, your wine, your oil, the offspring of your animals, the land which God swore to give to you. Baruch tiyeh mikol hamim, you will be blessed among all people. There will be no sterility among you or your flock. Clearly, we know this is very aspirational and idealized. God will remove from you all illness and all the evil diseases of Egypt which you knew. God will not set upon you, but God will hold your enemies accountable. The commentaries focus on the significance of the Hebrew word Ekev in the beginning verse, indicating a causative relationship. Many see a connection with the word Ekev, same spelling, different pronunciation, which means heel. Rashi interprets this as an allusion to those mitzvot which a person will trample with their heel because they do not seem important or critical, perhaps even insignificant. The Torah is telling us to be equally diligent with all of God's commandments, no less with those that may seem less significant to our finite minds. I've often used the image, the metaphor, and I apologize for repetition for those of you who listen to me continually, but for those who may have happened here by mistake or whatever, I think it bears repeating. If you've ever put a puzzle together, you look at the puzzle and you see all the pieces, and you think, how significant is one tiny little piece in a 2,500 piece puzzle? But work all those hours and put it together and find one piece that's missing. And then let's see if you really consider it insignificant. Everything is part of this puzzle that we live called life. Ibn Ezra and Nachmanides interpret this in the sense of in the end, in the heels of, or the sense that the heel is the extremity of the body, Ekev. The reward being something that follows the action. Thus, the causative relationship indicated by the grammatical construction of the verse. Along the same lines, Orach Hayim explains that true satisfaction and fulfillment comes at the end, the result of the complete fulfillment of all of the mitzvot. By contrast, Rabbeinu Bechayai, using the wordplay, presents this as an illusion that the reward we do not receive in this world, that we do receive in this world, is but a lowly and marginal, the heel aspect of the true worth of the mitzvot, looking toward Olam Haba, looking toward the world to come and our reward there. Baal HaTurim gives a gematria-based explanation. The word Ekev is used because it has the numerical value of 172. 172. The number of words in the Ten Commandments. According to Chabad teachings, the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, sees it as a reference to Ikveta the Mashiach, the generation that's on the heels of the Mashiach. The last generation of the exile is called the heels of the Mashiach by our sages because A, they are the spiritually lowest generation, at which point the Mashiach can no longer wait to come due to the descent of the generations, or B, it is the generation in which the footsteps of the Mashiach can already be heard. This is the generation that will hearken to these laws, as Rambam, Maimonides, writes. The Torah has already promised that the people of Israel will return to God at the end of their exile and will be immediately redeemed. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says, our commitment to Torah should be such that it permeates us entirely, so that even and also our heel, the lowest and the least sensitive part of our person, hearkens to these laws, observes them, and does them. In other words, our relationship with God should not be confined to the holy days of the year or to certain holy hours that we devote to prayer and study, but rather our life. We should embrace everyday actions in our life that defines our life. Indeed, this lowly and spiritually insensitive part of our life is the foundation of our relationship with God, in the same way that the heel is the base upon which the entire body stands and moves. Think about the notion that those of you who belong to or know of a synagogue named Rodef Shalom, chasing, running after peace, or Rodef Emet, chasing or running after truth. What do we chase with? Our heels. Every part is significant. Every part of the puzzle is significant. Every mitzvah is significant. This notion of relational and interactional connection between what we do and what God does permeates all of Devarim, as Moshe prepares the next generation to continue in the way he has set before them, as he will no longer be present to teach and remind them. It is a transition, an inflection point. The Orach Hayim teaches that while one is attending to all of these tasks, if one forgets that ultimately all things, including the tasks assigned to us and the fruit that we hope they bear, comes from God, then there will be pain, anguish, and so much else. The very challenging question posed by all of Devarim in these didactic lessons to future generations is, to what degree do we remember this? If we forget, then there will be pain. If we remember, there will not. But again, it's aspirational. I remember when I was a youth group member, when I went to Hillel International Camp, we were singing Birkat Hamazon. And the last paragraph, you sing, everybody sings, it gets loud, you clap. And I remember learning from Rabbi Joe Pollack from BU, those many years ago, that we say that quietly because it is aspirational. And we will see poverty, and we will see pain, and we will see all these things because we're not there yet. we're talking about a time that we are not there yet. As people often say, when something difficult and challenging and hard happens, we ask, God, why me? So the question is, when we are blessed and happy and fulfilled, do we stop to ask, God, why me? This is what happens when we focus more on what we want, even expect from God, instead of what God wants from us, which is where we should direct our attention as we remember all parts of the contract which script and hold this relationship together. I'm going to take a certain editorial license here because I didn't like the distinction in which the statement was made, but I think the statement still holds. So my iteration of a statement I once heard is, those of us that are sincere in our observance, in our religiosity, in our adherence, whatever that is, I'm not talking about how kosher your kitchen is or when you light Shabbat candles. I'm talking about the totality of what it means to be an observing, humble, engaged, conscious Jew, whatever that means to you. The difference between the one who feels that, says, what does God want from me? The one who does not subscribe to that notion may ask the question, what do I want from God? We must remember all parts of this contract which script and hold the relationship between us and God together. As our Parsha continues, we see this very human problem expressed. Chapter 8, verse 11, we read, do not forget that the Lord your God, by not keeping God's commandments, God's ordinances, and God's statutes, which I, Moshe, command you this day, lest you eat and be sated and build good houses and dwell therein, and you have your herds and your flocks. In other words, you have everything and you think, look at what I did, not what did God do for me. And your heart grows haughty. And you will grow haughty and forget that the only reason you have all this is because the Lord your God brought you up out of the land of Egypt. And this is written in the individual. In other words, every one of us should be aware of this. God led us through the desert in which there were snakes and vipers and scorpions and drought when there was no water. Who brought water out from a rock? Who led you with manna in the desert, which your forefathers did not know, in order to afflict you, in order to test you, to be beneficial in the end? We often hear about people who are very blessed and forget where it comes from, and they will think that it's all them. I'm a self-made person. No, nobody's a self-made person. And then something happens, and they'll tell you how it was a life-changing experience, how it made them remember not to take everything for granted. That's what we're saying here. When things are going our way too often, one may very well forget the founding partner of the relationship that allows such success. This is where hubris and haughtiness takes over, and the Ekev, the heel of our being, takes over, or, as we say, the tail wags the dog. This does not work, albeit some indication in the short run that it may. The long haul will ultimately teach otherwise. This is presently being discussed in our world in the context of failed democracies, where the conditional premise that grants permission to leaders is forgotten and ultimately betrayed. If we maintain a sense of humility in terms of our relationship with God, I would like to think that this would inform our relationships elsewhere in our lives. And such devastation as we are witnessing too often in our world today might be avoided or healed. Our Parsha ends with these verses, most of which is quite familiar to all of us, as part of the contractual formula of the Shema, whereby the contract giver, God, is announced, what we are to do is explained, and then the Ekev portion, if you will, the give and take of each signatory of the contract's responsibilities, and finally the seal, which has been discussed in these Parsha Shirim in past years. Vayayim shemot tishma'u hamitzvotai asher anochi mitzavetchem hayom. Plural here. Ula'avdo. בכל לבבכם ובכל נפשכם, ונתתי מטר בצרכם בעתו ירא מלכוש וכו' וכו'. And it will come to pass, you will hearken, all of you, individually and collectively, to God's commandments, which God is commanding that day, to love the Lord your God, to serve God with all your heart, and to serve God with all your soul. Then I will give, says God, the rain of your land in its season, the former rain, the later rain, the earlier ones, the later ones, and you will then have corn and wine and oil. And I will give grass in your fields for cattle, and you will eat and be satisfied. Take heed to yourselves, tishmeru lachem, plural, lest your heart be deceived, pen yivtel levavachem, v'sartem v'avaltem Elohim echavim, and you turn aside and worship other gods. And the anger of God will then be kindled against you. God will shut up the heaven, there will be no rain, the ground will not yield fruit. You shall lay these words on your heart. Now we know in this paragraph we repeat a lot of what we said in the first paragraph. We speak of the words when we leave our house, when we come in, when we lie down, when we get up. The difference is here we interpose the plural with the singular. So while the first paragraph is solely about what we singularly do, here we are bopping back and forth between the collective and the singular. You shall write them upon the doors of your gates and your house, that your days may be multiplied. Ki'im shamar tishmarun, and this is what's called the imperative form of the verb. For you shall, we repeat the verb. In other words, in English we might say, you should be very, very careful. So here in Hebrew it works out that you'd say, you should be careful, be careful. In other words, be surely careful, be absolutely careful. You must diligently keep this commandment, which I command you to do it, to love God, your God, to walk in all of God's ways, and to attach yourself to God. Then God will drive out these nations before you, and you will be able to live. Kol makom asher tidroch kaf raglechem b'alechem yihya. Every place where the sole of your foot, not the heel here, shall tread will be yours, from the wilderness, Lebanon, from the river, Euphrates, and to the sea. No person, no individual, no entity will be able to stand against you. The Lord your God will protect you. Rashi explains that we should continually receive and remind ourselves of these words and teachings of God every day, including Hayom. And it says in there, Hayom. In other words, you're reading them, and I'm not saying, they said long ago, today I will. But by repeating these words every day, the Shema, we are reaffirming our part of the contract today. And therefore, by doing so, we are constantly focused, hopefully, on our obedience and accountability to an entity much larger and greater than us. This, too, is part of the causative nature of the explanation. I want to parenthetically say, and this is not a political statement, guys, I find when somebody speaks with humility, when somebody speaks with faith, when somebody knows what is in their heart, when somebody is grateful to God, they lead, they walk, they live a different life. It is not to say that those that don't believe in God per se, as we think of God, cannot be good people, chas v'chalila, but to understand that the narcissistic view where everything revolves around an individual, this egocentricity that we see, that's what this protects one from. And however one protects oneself from that, I think that person is a finer and a more qualitative human being on many levels, because that person remembers the vulnerability of what it means to be human and will not say, I'm a self-made person. This, too, is part of the causative nature of this explanation. But unfortunately, as we know, hubris gets in the way. This is the human challenge, the misstep that creates so many of the truly momentous problems in our lives, whereby we forget our place in the contractual agreement with God or with whatever entity to which we hold ourselves accountable, for those who don't believe in God. This can be applied to too many situations in our lives today with runaway leaders who do not observe the Ekev contract of their own situations. Oh, those laws aren't important. I'll just get rid of them. Beginning with their responsibilities to those who placed them in their positions to serve them and not to benefit themselves. As we turn to our Haftarah from Yeshayahu, Parak 49, chapter 49, we see this dynamic clearly. God says, "Even the captives of a mighty warrior can be taken, and the prey of a tyrant shall escape. And with your contender I will contend, and your sons I will save. Those who taunt you I will take from them. They will become drunk from their own blood." In other words, the power hungry, they will become drunk from the blood they shed. "And all flesh will know." And again, this is from Yeshayahu chapter 49, when we're talking about the days to come, the days of the Mashiach. Remember, he'll love the Mashiach from the Parsha. All flesh should know on that day, v'yedu kol basar, not kol Yisrael, not even kol Adam, kol basar, every flesh, every being that God has created will know. Ki ani Hashem Moshiach v'galech avir Yaakov. I am the Lord who saves you. I will redeem you, the mighty one of Yaakov. It's interesting, and we talked a little bit last week about kol basar, every human being. And it goes back to the very beginning. We're approaching the end of the Chamesh Chomshei Torah, but we go back to the very beginning in the story of creation. We're not talking about anything that is connected to the lives of Jewish people or any group of people. God creates Adam, the earthling, and we are all earthlings. And that way we are all connected. And unfortunately, people forget that, and that too is part of the contract. And when the Messianic days are invoked, notice the word that's used. V'yedu kol basar ki ani Hashem. And all flesh, all beings will know that I am God. Firstly, note that this is clearly directed to the Bnei Yisrael in their times of distraught. And there is a reminder of the notion that all people, kol basar, must know that God is the one with whom all contracts of behavior begin. Further, we must note the focus of Ekev, and Megalecha Avicha Yaakov, and that God will redeem us, the mighty one of Yaakov. Clearly, this sense of accountability must remain with us at all times. And as the Baal Turim teaches, the very word Ekev reflects humility, stepping back, thinking about the directions that we choose to move in and what will happen as a result. Further, even in exile, when all may seem lost, and there are many types of exile, physical, spiritual, existential, and so on, we learn in the Sifrei. Though I exile you from the land, continue to be distinguished in the practice of mitzvot, so that when you return home, they will not be new to you. This may be compared to the parable of the king who became very angry with his wife, so that she went back to her father's house. Said he to her, "Adorn yourself with your ornaments, so that when you return home, they will not be new to you." Similarly, the Holy One, blessed be God, said to Israel, "My children, be distinguished by mitzvot wherever you go." Ki teitzeh, remember a few weeks ago, when you go out, no matter where you live, do these mitzvot, so that when you come back to your land, back to be God, back to yourself, they will not be new to you. Moshe, in his speech, conveying this message of what if, and the choices that the Bnei Yisrael make to maintain their preparedness. It's all here. There's a land flowing with so much awaiting them. There will be battles that will be tests for their fortitude and their faith, and they must rise to the occasion and not simply fall back on their heels. I would suggest that this is a message that is easily adaptable to our own times in so many ways. There will always be challenges that remain that we must address. We will become frustrated. We will become dejected. But we must continue to move forward. The question is, can we step back on our heels and see God's greater plan amongst us, working through all and each of us individually and collectively? A very early Shabbat Shalom, unless you choose to listen to this on Thursday when it's normally recorded. And I will see you all in a bit more than 2 weeks, at which point I will discuss Re'eh and Shoftim. L'hitraot. Stay safe, stay hydrated, and be well all.